fear more than anything in the world.
I'm trying to catch the wave, whoa. Come on. I'm trying to catch the wave, whoa. Come on. I'm trying to catch the wave, whoa. Let me slide in right here. I'm trying to catch the wave, whoa. Come on. I'm trying to catch the wave, whoa. Come on. I'm trying to catch the wave, whoa.
Hey everyone, my name's Matt and I'm part of the team here at Hill City. If you're watching with us for the first time ever this morning, thanks for being here. We want you to know that Hill City is a safe place for you to explore your faith, so bring any of your doubts, questions, or curiosities, and we'd love to walk through them with you. Or we could skip through them, or dance through them, or tumble through them with you. It's your choice, really. If you go to this link, you'll be able to fill out a connection card, and someone will be in touch to help you take a first step into getting plugged in here at Hill City. At that same link, you can find all the other things you would ever need to know, like any information on kids resources, how to sign up for a watch party, how to get connected with a community group, or how to get tickets for tonight. That's right, tonight we are going to see Onward at the Goochland Drive-In, and it's going to be amazing. You'll get to socialize from a safe distance and watch one of my favorite Pixar movies. I mean, guys, Onward is seriously probably the best Pixar movie yet. I like it because it's geared directly towards me, but also it's super good because it just sort of leads you into the end, which is a tearjerker.
My favorite part
but it's about
Chris Pratt's character has
like a names, stuff like Smite,
the patches are hilarious.
and
They're all
like
supposed to be
Hades,
He's
and
also
like
like
heavy metal band
stuff
names,
which is Smite.
Gates open at 6:30 and tickets are $20 a car. You have to buy tickets in advance, so make sure you go get them before you come or you won't be able to get in. Find out more details and get those tickets at that very same link. This month, we're giving money for every Facebook check-in to support Hope in the Cities, which is a flagship program of initiatives of change. So even though we're not streaming on Facebook anymore, check in over there at some point to make sure to support their work. If you'd like prayer for anything, just click the live prayer button and you'll be connected to a member of our prayer team. Next up is our 2 minutes to comment, followed by a few songs, and then the next message in our Stronger series. Your question for 2 minutes to comment today is, if you went on a road trip right now, where would your destination be?
You're a man of your word, yeah. All things are possible when we believe. All You keep your promises. If you said it, we believe it. If you said it, if you said it, we believe it. Hey. If you said it, we believe it. 'Cause you're a man of your word. If you said it, we believe it. Oh, 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 oh. If you said it, we believe it. Yeah. 'Cause you're a man of your word. Yeah, all things are possible when we believe. All chains are breakable when we receive Yahweh. You keep your promises. If you said it, we believe it. If you said it, if you said it, we believe it. Hey. 'Cause if you said it, we believe it. 'Cause you're a man of your word. If you said it, we believe it. Oh, 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 oh. If you said it, we believe it. 'Cause you're a man of your word. We have this confidence that you'll finish what you started. God, you have never failed. You won't start with me. You're present in every step. You're patient in every heartache. God, you have never failed. You won't start with me. Oh, oh, oh. Everybody rock like, hey, 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 hey. 'Cause if you said it, we believe it. Oh, if you said it, we believe it. Yeah, 'cause you're a man of your word. And we have this confidence that you finish what you started. God, you have never failed. You won't start with me. Patient in every step, patient in every heartache. God, you will never fail. You won't start with me. 'Cause if you said it, we believe it. Yeah, you're a man of your word. If you said it, we believe it. Oh, 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 oh. If you said it, we believe it. 'Cause you're a man of your word. You're faithful through the ages. God of Abraham, you're the God of covenants and faithful promises. Time and time again, you have proven you do just what you say. Though the storms may come and the winds may blow, I'll remain steadfast and let my heart learn when you speak a word, it will come to pass. Great is your faithfulness to me. Great is your faithfulness to me. From the rising sun to the setting same, I will praise your name. Great is your faithfulness to me. Oh,
Though the earth may pass away, your word remains the same. Yeah, your history can prove there's nothing you can do. You're faithful and true. Though the storms may come and the winds may blow, I'll remain steadfast and let my heart learn when you speak a word, it will come to pass. Great is your faithfulness to me. Great is your faithfulness to me. From the rising sun to the setting same, I will praise your name. Great is your faithfulness to me. Your faithfulness, it never runs out. It never runs out. I put my faith in Jesus, my anchor to the ground, my hope and firm foundation. He'll never let me down. I put my faith in Jesus, my anchor to the ground, my hope and firm foundation. He'll never let me down. Oh, I put my faith in Jesus, my anchor to the ground, my hope and firm foundation. He'll never let me down. No, he'll never let me down. Great is your faithfulness to me. Oh, great is your faithfulness to me. From the rising sun to the setting same, I will praise your name. Great is your faithfulness to me. Great is your faithfulness to me. Great is your faithfulness to me. From the rising sun to the setting same, I will praise your name. Great is your faithfulness to me.
Well, hey, good morning, everybody. Thanks for watching here today. If this is your first time, my name is John Wagler, and I'm part of this team, and so grateful you decided to join us here today. We are in the midst of our Stronger series, which is centered around how do we build healthy relationships, because there is just a reality that our satisfaction in life really hinges on how healthy our relationships are. And originally, when we scheduled this series, we had a plan. And then life happened, and here we are. And so we switched up the plan for this series. I kicked it off a few weeks ago. We had Nicole Eunice come in, and then Lacey did her thing as well. And then the next 2 weeks, what we're going to do is we're going to have some interviews. And we wanted to have a chance to talk with some folks in our community to kind of give some different perspective. You know, our life verse for church is actually from 1 Thessalonians 2:8, and it says this, that we loved you so much that we shared with you not only God's good news, but our own lives too. And for those of you that have been around our community for any length of time, you know that we have a big share offering that we do every year, which is where it came out of this verse. But I started thinking about that when we think about a loving community and what it actually looks like to love people, we share our lives with each other. We get perspectives from each other. We listen and we learn from each other. It actually builds compassion. It builds empathy. It allows us to kind of step in to maybe some of the tough points in life too and grow together. I want to read a couple of scripture passages before we start talking with our guest here. Well, she's not really a guest. She's home. She's home folk with us. But in John 13, Jesus is talking and he says this, "Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet." And I love this part. He says, "I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly, I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them." Meaning, if you don't love in this way, you won't be blessed. That's a big deal. He then continues on later in that chapter, and Jesus says, "Your love for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciples." So if we don't love one another, then we are proving we are not following Jesus. And then this verse has been kind of stuck in my mind and in my heart for the last few weeks. And in Galatians 6:2, it says this, "To share each other's burdens, and in this way obey the law of Christ." If you think you are too important to help someone, you're only fooling yourself. You are not that important. And I love this idea of sharing each other's burdens, or some of you might know this as carrying each other's burdens, depending on the translation you use. But it says that in this way, when we carry each other's burdens, that we are actually obeying what Jesus taught. And so, and to understand for us, how do we carry each other's burdens, we have to then engage someone else's burden. And we have to learn from someone else that might have a different experience. I was watching a video of a professor, this was a long time ago now, but she got up there. It was a room full of students, and she got up there and she asked this question, how many of you would willingly trade being white to be black in America? And I remember just sitting there listening, and not one hand was raised, and everyone just kind of sat there. You could hear a pin drop in the auditorium. And so I wanted us as a community, we've been in this conversation since the beginning of our church for the last 6 years and have been a part of it. And obviously things have heightened to a level where hopefully this becomes catalyst for a lot of change. But one of the things that we want to do in particular through our podcast that we've been doing several episodes and interviews on, and as well here for these 2 weeks, is to really start learning and growing and listening. And one of the ways that we wanted to do that was actually to bring folks in to provide some different perspective. And I want to also say this is not about alienating anybody, right? Like, this is about how do we grow together as a community together, okay? And so with that in mind, I want to introduce to you our guest today, and her name is Rasheeda Creighton. And so I'm so thankful for Rasheeda, like for many different ways. Like, we've talked in different scenarios about some business stuff, some building stuff, some like in different ways. And you've been a part of our community for a while. And you got a great voice, and on social media, and so intelligent and so well thought out. You did a wonderful job on our podcast too. And so welcome.
Thank you.
Love having you here.
I'm glad to be here.
I know. And so thank you for being a part of this. And if you could just give a brief, just kind of synopsis of who is Rasheeda.
Yeah.
We'd love to do that, and then we'll kind of get into some content.
Sure. So I think the thing I always tell people is I am born and raised in Richmond. My joke is that I graduated high school and thought I'd leave and never come back. But it's been 18 years, so I think I'm here. And this is home for me. I was introduced to the church in a meaningful way, actually, when I was 10 years old. And so some 30 plus years later, I have been, really since I've been at Hill City, so about the past, 4 years, navigating and redefining what my relationship with God looks like. And this has been a great place for me to do that. And so that's kind of me a little bit. I'm a mom, single mom. I've got a little girl who's 5 and almost 6. She thinks July is tomorrow, so almost 6. And I was a corporate exec for 15 years. I worked in a Fortune 100 company here, left 3 months ago. and actually have started my own entrepreneurial journey. So I do some consulting work. I'm also a very big advocate for small businesses, and especially for supporting Black-owned small businesses. So that's kind of me.
That's awesome. That's so well. I love that part because I think you're going to give some good perspective on that end of things too. Because I think part of the story within this cultural conversation about systematic issues, part of that is like Black-owned businesses and how to support and kind of raise up that too. So I love that part of it. So here's question number one. Your faith is important to you, as we kind of, talked about. And what have you seen through, the last few weeks? And I say few weeks, and I almost hate saying that because this is 400 years. So like, it's not like but in particular, we're kind of seeing a larger movement right now that my perspective would be that it feels different this go around, right? So even through your faith and just kind of what you're seeing, like what is bringing you hope, and then maybe what's bringing you some concern?
Yeah. The hope is definitely coming from the interactions that are happening. Like the conversations that I have been having one-on-one or that I've been observing on social media are genuine. It feels like, it's like there was this awakening, right? And it's like, people have suddenly, in some ways, seen the depth of what happens in this country. And I was talking to somebody the other day, and I said, to me, it's kind of amazing. It's like God orchestrated it in a way. I think about like we were all home for COVID, and everybody was dealing with their own stuff of like, I'm home and I have nowhere to go.
Sure.
And then this happened, and the sequence of events that happened really kind of forced everyone to look at things in a deeper way and really be self-reflective. And the reason that gives me hope is we are all being self-reflective. We are all thinking. Like, I even think about myself. Anti-racism was actually something I didn't have a good grasp on. And hadn't really heard about till a few weeks ago. And so it's challenged me in thinking about how do I actually perpetuate not just diversity, but anti-racism in my own life. And so like, I'm hopeful of the conversations and the intent and what feels real. I went over to the Lee Monument Sunday morning before the 9:30 broadcast. But I spent some time over there, and I was looking at some of the statements that had been sprayed on there. And there was one that I particularly took a picture of, and it said, "This time is different." And it is different. There's something that feels different about it. There's something that has hope embedded in it. There's something that feels like we are all coming together, not for a symbolic cause, but for something that's really meaningful and deep. And I hope and pray doesn't end in 3 weeks when kind of the hype dies down, if you would.
Yeah. It's interesting because like I think COVID further separated people. Like it was like not intentionally divisive, but people have their opinions on what you should and shouldn't do, and some of it was political in nature and all that stuff. But as awful as all the things that have transpired it's been interesting to see people coming together in some capacity. And I think I agree with you. I think it's just something different.
Yeah.
That's right. When you're looking back, is there something for you that you're like, other than, I know you just said, hey, I hope it doesn't like dissipate, but like, is there anything else with that you're kind of like, gosh, this is still a concern to me. Is there anything else?
I think it's the thing that always runs in my head, which is, are we getting to the root or are we talking about surface? And that's just always an underlying concern for me. And that's an underlying concern for me with anything. I'm like, is that a surface issue or is that a root issue?
Yeah.
I see us getting towards the root of things. But I have that question always of like, are we going to tear down the monuments and change street names and say we're done?
Yeah.
And there's so much more work to do.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. You've been you've been successful in business, whatever that means, right? Like, but I mean, like you've done well in, the business world, and as you said earlier, an entrepreneur now and everything. And you mentioned something on our podcast that it was a subtle little comment in the midst of an hour conversation that I was like, that's really interesting. And you said that going out on your own allowed you to fully be yourself. Mm-hmm. And I found that to be fascinating. And so I just thought it would be great for you to kind of share some perspective of what it's like in the corporate world for someone who is Black and also a woman, which is like you have the double thing going on there. But I don't think people hear that very often, and in the way you shared it, I was like, gosh, I want to hear more about that. So could you share just a little bit about what it's like being a Black woman in the corporate world?
It's interesting. I think about this a lot, and the best way to describe it is you can look at corporate, right? It's a lot of white males. So if you are a Black male, your privilege level is being male. Mm. If you are a white woman, your privilege level is being white. Mm-hmm. But I don't have either of those. And so it is a constant evaluation and in a lot of ways censoring, because you're not sure how things show up. So if I'll give you a great example. I was in a meeting one time. There's a group of us, we were talking about a project that was going on, and there was an update. I can't remember the details of what was said, but something that was said in the conversation, like literally red flags and lights going off in my head. And I had a visceral reaction, like, you can't say that. Why would someone say that? And there were 2 other Black women in the room, and we were sitting across from each other, and we all locked eyes. And I knew, okay, I'm not the only one that just heard that. But before anyone said anything, I knew what we were all doing because I knew what I was doing. I was literally running a dialogue and almost like an evaluation in my head of, do I say something? Because if I say something, does that translate to not being a team player? So this is how it translates in like a behind closed doors conversation of not a team player, aggressive, angry is the language, whereas something that a white male may bring up sounds like a go-getter, assertive, really knows how to implement change, right?
Yeah.
Challenges.
Doesn't mind conflict.
Right. Yeah. And the language makes a difference, and there's bias embedded in that. And one of my peers said, well, what do you mean by that? And I was like, oh, that was a good way to key up. And we had a great conversation about it. Yeah. And we had an open discussion about it, but that evaluation isn't a unique thing. I'm always reading the room.
Sure.
And thinking about how might what I say be perceived, and how can I come across with the intent that I mean without it, damaging me later. And it's never at least in my experience, it's never been it's this one incident that happened. It's what I call a series of constant microaggressions.
Right, yeah.
And so it's you call me somebody, you call me Yvette, but I'm Rasheeda. I'm the other Black girl in the room,
sure.
right?
Yeah,
It's that, or it's, somebody said to me, I've had this happen several times, I never know what hair I'm going to get with you. And it's like, thanks, really? Yeah. And it's things that seem innocent, and I don't necessarily believe there's intent behind them. But when they add up, it forces you to constantly evaluate, and then you're constantly censoring yourself. So even when you say, I want to bring my whole self to work, it's like, I don't know if you're actually ready for whole self.
Yeah.
And so that's really what the experience has been. Obviously, I've been successful, but that success comes at not always speaking my mind. And something has triggered. I think something triggered when I turned 40. And I think something has triggered in the past month where I'm like, this is what you get.
Yeah.
And this is how I feel about it. And this is how, what I don't talk about is how I'm working on things, because I'm not one of those that's like, I'm doing all of these things. but I am vocal about my perspectives about it. And then behind the scenes, I'm doing a lot.
Yeah.
And somebody texted me last week, and we were talking, and they said, wow, you just left like right before all of this. And I was like, yeah, I think I'd get fired if I was still here. And they just kind of laughed, and I was like, I don't know if I could say all of this.
Yeah, no, which that is part of the problem, right? Like, it's a huge problem in the corporate world.
Yeah.
And I've heard several folks talk about the microaggression element, and some of that comes out of ignorance for people, right? Like, you don't realize some of the things that you might say that, like, I don't mean that to be offensive, you know, but you're right. It like builds on top of each other. I remember, this is probably just an aggression, not even a microaggression, but I remember hearing someone say this recently, actually, and this was brought to light years ago for me, but someone made the comment, "You're the whitest black person I know." You know, and I heard someone say that, and I was just like, you can't say that, right? And they're like, no, I'm not meaning it. Like, I'm like, but like there was an ignorance there to when they said it, but there are accepted things that people say, and that one's certainly, that's an aggression, not microaggression. Yeah. But there are certain things that people have accepted along the way that they don't think is a big deal that continues to kind of chip away at people to where you can't be yourself,
right? And
is so problematic. You know, there's obviously no question racism still exists, right? Yeah. Like that's we're not that's not even on the table for a discussion, but we see so many different examples in different ways. This concept of allyship is a big deal, and some people may have heard that term before, maybe some others haven't. What are a few things that you think would be helpful for people to understand about being an ally and what that looks like, and how they can, what even the interaction looks like, you know?
Yeah. So I did something when I was still in corporate. I joined the LGBTQ organization in my organization. And I did that because I wanted to learn and I wanted to be a better ally. And the first thing that I did was I just listened. And I think we miss that sometimes. Like, it's like, I see this, I want to fix it. But what I believe is that in order to fix something, you have to know what you're fixing and you have to know what the solution is. And you can't come in and say, I know this is the answer of what you need, unless you have had a conversation with the people who need something. And understand that, and really taking the time to understand it and get into the depths. I went on Be the Bridges website, and they have this awesome Facebook group, and one of the rules is you have to be silent for the first 3 months and just listen.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, yes. Just learn.
They're just like typing on the side, all these things. Yeah.
But like, just learn and listen and absorb, because we get so much out of that when we really are listening and hearing. And I think regardless of what you are being an ally for, that's a critical first step.
Yeah.
And then when you understand that, and you understand what is it that you are asked that you need support for, what is it that I'm an ally for? Is it for a big cause? Is it for a specific thing? Then what you're doing is you're coming alongside that agenda.
Yeah. Not
creating your own agenda, which I think is something that we see a lot of, this creation of, okay, so now these are the 800 things we need to do. And I'm always like, did anybody have a conversation?
Sure, yeah.
Did anybody hear, or does anybody know, did you go to, it's NAACP has the We Are Done Dying, right? Like, did you go there? Where did you go? Color of Change. Did you go to any of these resources and see what the asks are? And that's at a national level, but I've been in conversations at a local level where we are talking about, what do we need? What is our ask?
Yeah.
And we can push forward and be impactful collectively when we know what the asks are and we're all speaking the same way. We may approach it differently, because I think everyone has a role to play in a lane that they move in.
Yeah.
But if we're all going towards the same goal, then we've got it. And being anti-racist is a big goal, but it's a really big goal with a lot of things under it.
Yeah. You mentioned that earlier about the difference between saying, I'm not racist versus being anti-racist.
Yeah.
For you, like, what does that mean to you when the difference in those two phrases?
Yeah. So I'm not racist is a self-centering thing. It is, no, I don't think these things and I don't believe that. Being anti-racist is an active state. There was a post that I shared that talked about, and this was one of the things that solidified it for me. It talked about when you're teaching your children. And I was raised this way, and I do this with my daughter of like exposing, making sure she sees herself in her books, in the places that we go, like exposure, right? And where it first struck me was not in that post, but a friend of ours had given her a Barbie doll, and it was a white Barbie doll. And I don't like generally for my child to have non-black dolls.
Yeah.
But the reason that I paused is because our friend is biracial. And I thought to myself, but this reflects her.
Yeah.
And that's her friend. And it is okay. Like, everyone should have dolls of all background. And it seems really minor, but I take that and then I layer into, okay, so how do I teach diversity, but also teach, we advocate for others, right?
Great.
It's not okay to make racial jokes, period.
Right.
Not just black jokes, right?
Yeah.
It's just not okay.
Yeah.
And so how do we educate there, and then how do we advocate in our own lives? And that is an ongoing process, and that is a long process. That is not we figured it out, we're good next week. I just ordered How to Be Anti-Racist, and I just ordered White Fragility because I'm like, I have work to do. I need to learn these things. And I think that's the key that's important. One is passive and self-centering, and the other is active and intentional and educational.
Yeah. And there's different ways to do that, to your point too. And even whether it doesn't matter if you're single, like this is the element of carrying each other's burdens. Like this is the loving one another piece to this. Even for our youngest Ruby, we do some different things with our oldest kids, and what we expose them to and have them read. And we've been doing that for years, trying to get them to read different kinds of books. And, and even when they do history, when they start talking about history at school, we're always trying to make them do some other things. But one of the things with our youngest Ruby about the baby doll thing, because we've seen the plethora of white baby dolls and everything. And I remember reading something, this was years ago, about how they perceive beauty.
Yes.
And so we got, when we were in Africa, we got a baby doll to bring back. And so we put that in her crib, and we always referred to her as pretty baby doll. Like, because we just wanted to make sure that there was an element that she's named everything else like other names, but she always addresses that baby doll as like pretty baby doll. Because we just wanted to make sure that you never got that message lost. And it's subtle, and some people are like, that's meaningless. Like, what does that actually do? But it's a little, all the little things can pile up on top of each other, good or bad.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. When you cannot speak for the entire Black community, but when you think about what the community needs right now, what are some things from your perspective that you'd like to highlight for everybody?
I think the support has been really important. And feeling seen has been really important. So for me, it's been the friends that call and check on me, who always check on me. If anything happens in my life, they're like, are you good? What do you need? Right? So that's the thing. It's a continuation of those things. Yeah. But I think we also need the action to line up. And so I don't know if you saw the viral tweet that was like, hey, thanks for your corporate statements. Can I see a picture of your board?
Sure. Yeah.
Let's not be performative on the steps that we're taking. Let's really think about the systems. That's the key. Yeah. In all of this, it all goes back to systemic. And I think understanding that means you've got to dig into roots. That means you've got to go deeper. That means we've got to have those tough conversations, and everybody is going to be uncomfortable.
Right.
That's going to be key. Yes, protests. Yes, all of the things that people need to do. At the end of the day, we need to make sure that action still happens.
Yeah. And that's the idea too of allyship is you have the systemic ally, right? And then you got the personal.
Yeah.
The range is so big there. And, after talking to so many people over the past several weeks and thinking about how the more personal allyship you have, the easier the systemic one is.
Yeah.
Because it's like, no, this is my person.
Yeah.
Right. It changes everything in terms of how you see everything. So for our church, you've been a part 3 years, 4 years, 4 years.
Yeah.
We are predominantly white. Like, this is kind of a thing that we always internally joke about when someone's like, "You guys seem like a diverse church." I'm like, to white people. Anyway, we're probably, 75 to 80% white, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so in Richmond, it's not terrible,
Yeah.
And we're growing in that area. Of course, our staff is more diverse than our church is, but what's it like? There are things that like people don't understand, right? If you're coming into a predominant space, what are some things, like a couple little things that maybe just for awareness factors that people just know and think about in this context?
So I joke I go to white church. That's what I
Yeah, that's just fine. I get it. No matter how much I talk about Fred Hammond and Kurt Frank, I get it.
Exactly. But the thing that I love about here is, so when I came, I was beginning to go through a divorce. I streamed for a month.
Okay.
Because I had my own insecurities and concerns about how I would be perceived. And when I came here, like, none of that manifested. Everybody was like, "Hey, welcome, love you, happy to have you here."
Sure.
You sent an email when I filled out the thing, like, "Hey, we're praying for you. Let us know what you need." And it's always been that way. And there is an authenticity in that I greatly appreciate. I've had conversations over the years with friends who talk about, like, it's almost like in some ways I felt more free here in my Christianity than I have in other ministries I've been a part of over the years.
Wow.
And the way that I always describe it, I'm like, it's Jesus, straight, no chaser. Like, that's what I always say. Like, it is Bible, it is word, and that is what you get. And some of the tradition and things that you might see in other places, we don't have here.
Right, yeah.
And I know everything here is intentional, but you can't control how other people behave. And so that spirit has actually carried through everybody that's a part of Hill City.
Yeah.
And that is something that, like, I greatly value. Now, we've had our Fred Hammond discussions.
Sure.
So, the music might be a little bit different. But I've also, I love Hillsong. And so I'm always like, oh, that's my jam. And so it works. But it's very loving. It's very welcoming. I've never felt self-conscious. I think the thing, I've been sharing a lot of the messages. I always share them, but especially recently. And the thing I always tell people, I'm like, this isn't new for us.
Right, yeah.
Anything that's happened in the 4 years, you have never hesitated to address. And so that authenticity about, we really love God, we really love people. And that's what matters. It just makes it home.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, last question. And before we get into the last one, I just want to read the scripture passage because it's important to this question that I want to talk about. 2 Corinthians 5 says this: "So we have stopped evaluating others from a human point of view." And that part's critical in this. At one time, we thought of Christ merely from a human point of view. How differently we know him now. This means that anyone who belongs to Christ has become a new person. The old life is gone. The new life has begun. And, with a lot of this discussion around race and some of the things you brought to light here and everything, this one common factor becomes critical in this discussion, and that is our identity, you know. And when I think about this passage and thinking about the human point of view, that's like saying only seeing people like in one way rather than having a larger conversation of saying like, hey, we're all in this together. Like this is the loving one another part too. And so for you, when you're thinking about this, like a concern I have, like as like I kind of take a step back and look at things, is that some folks are kind of losing their identity. Like their identity is getting shaped by something else in the conversation. For you, as someone who does put their identity in Christ first, have you felt a little tension with that still? And or maybe some things that maybe God's been like kind of churning in you a little bit?
So I haven't felt it lately, but I'm going to tell you why. When we did the discipleship classes this time, I made a conscious decision to do the starting point class.
Okay.
Because I knew that I wanted to, I tell my classes, I wanted to reread the Bible with a different lens. And so I did the class, and of course we did the starting point book. And one of the things that resonated for me, which is tied to what you're asking, was we talked about the lens in which we view our Christianity. And we talked about you're taught through the lens of what the Bible says, but you need to understand through the lens of who Jesus was and is. And taking on that, like that was like, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And taking on that perspective has allowed me to view things in a different way. And so, you know, understanding Jesus's walk here and where he challenged and where he went against the law at times, but always to the point of humanity and loving people and being the example of God and being God on this earth. That actually has allowed me to not have that conflict anymore.
That's great.
Because I view it in that lens where it's like, no, this is about people, and we love all people, and we think of all people, and then we think of how we lead them to Christ. Like that's that's all encompassing. And so I have at times felt that tension. I have observed that tension in conversations that I have had.
Right.
Where some of the ways that the Bible has been used historically, going all the way back, justifying slavery and all these things, some of that is still present in some of the doctrine and the kind of less scriptural based, but more tradition based. And I have seen that manifest in conversations that folks have had that have been very hurtful. And I think that's where you have to be mindful. But if we look at Jesus as, you know, who is Jesus? How did Jesus think about things? How did he teach us to think about things? Then it gives you a different lens to let some of that extra stuff go.
Yeah, that's great. Well, that's a great thought to end on, and I appreciate that, and so appreciate your time here with us and just letting us listen and learn and just hear some different perspectives on everything. I wish we could all give you a hand clap and all that. I'm just imagining everyone is right now, so we'll just pretend that that's the case. Thank you so much. So grateful for you and spending time with us and being part of our community too.
I love being here.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to close this out in some prayer and then have one little thing for you guys too. So let's pray. God, one, we're just so thankful for Rasheeda and her honesty and her heart and her perspective and her voice in our community. We can be strong as a community when we value everyone's perspective, everyone's voice, and it allows us to stay humble, to stay curious, and to really shape the community in the way that you want it to be shaped, God. And so when we think about truly loving one another, when we think about truly carrying each other's burdens, when we think about finding our identity in you, it's a choice that we have to make, and it's a choice that we have to push away politics. We've got to push away bias. We've got to push away all of the things that hinder us from truly creating a community that loves you well, then that loves others well. So God, I just pray for a special kind of conviction through all of us in any ways that we might, have, like as we talked about with like these kind of microaggressions, any little ways that in terminology or sayings that might be hurtful. Just pray a special kind of conviction against any kind of, if we're placing our identity in anything else but you. And for all of us, God, we have to choose to follow you every single day. And I pray for anyone here who's listening today, if this is like your first time and you're saying, I want to choose to do that, to say yes to Jesus today. And for others who've done it before, like, hey, you got to be reminded to always choose Jesus. And so, God, we just thank you for what you're shaping in our community, and just love you for it. In your name, amen. For anyone here listening, if you did say yes to Jesus today and you want to talk to someone, there are people there, there are hosts there waiting to speak with you, and you can connect with them. For everyone else, I just wanted to say thank you for your continued generosity. It truly is unbelievable. Honestly, the heart of our community and the way you've continued to step forward and want to get involved. I really wish I could list out all of the things that we've been doing, because there are some things from big kind of corporate level things that we're partnering with organizations and nonprofits and diving in. There's a lot of like person-to-person things that have happened, and in some major ways that have helped reshape people's lives. And we're only able to do that because you guys are so generous. And so thank you. Thank you for having the heart to do so and to make a difference in this community. If you want to give, there's ways to do that. You see that there with the link tree, and also on the tab there. So thank you guys so much. Love y'all, and we will see you next week.
Thanks so much for being a part of this morning with us. If you're out there and you have questions, prayer needs, or want to talk to someone about next steps in your faith, there are a couple of ways to follow up. You can click on the chat button right now and talk to a guest services person, or click on the link and simply fill out a connection card. We'll see you next week.